Alright, so in a development that shouldn't shock anyone, the minimum wage increases in New York City are hurting its businesses. Another round of layoffs are expected in the hospitality sector, and rising food prices in the restaurant industry are putting the squeeze on them pretty hard. The cost of a Big Mac, for example, has increased by $1 so far. Now, some may say, who cares? Spend an extra dollar on a Big Mac, it's no big deal so others can get a higher wage. Now, the problem with this is that the people hurt most by these price increases are generally those who minimum wage is designed supposedly to help. They're people who make modest livings. And so when labor costs are artificially increased, given that profit margins are so often very thin, businesses are forced to increase prices to stay afloat. Then just ask yourself, who's paying those prices? And what does that mean for those people's purchasing power? It's the low-wage worker, and the price increases hurt them the most. Because that's a very important point here. It is not good enough to simply advocate for the face value of people's paychecks to be increased. The fundamental purchasing power itself must be considered here as well. It doesn't do the general population any good if they're getting larger paychecks, but at the same time the price tags are increasing all around them for the goods and services that they want. And as I mentioned before, we have restaurants who are scratching their head wondering how they're going to make ends meet, and layoffs have already begun for many businesses in an attempt to stay afloat. Again, who does this hurt? Well, one group that suffers are the very people, again, that minimum wage advocates think they're helping. This stems from them seemingly not understanding what profit margins are. A business may take in a good chunk of money, but they also pay out a good chunk of money, and very often it's a slim difference between what they take in versus what they pay out. And if you increase the hourly wage of workers like this, that can easily put businesses into the red. The only way to survive this is to say to the workers, sorry, but we can't keep you on. It's just not possible if we want this business to survive. So again, instead of making $15 an hour, because that's what the minimum wage is, those workers are now making the real minimum wage, which is $0 an hour. Or if that doesn't happen, these businesses are forced to cut their employees' hours, which has been happening in New York City at an increased rate as well. Again, people who advocate for a minimum wage will applaud a situation in which unemployment might not have increased significantly after a minimum wage hike, but routinely ignore other factors that put the squeeze on those workers, like cutting hours. Cutting hours for these workers is disastrous for them. In terms of my income, I'd much rather work a job paying $10 an hour, but I can work 40 hours a week, rather than a job that pays $15 an hour, but I can only work 20 hours a week. I'd be losing out on $100 a week, which is almost $5,000 a year. Compounding this problem is that many restaurants in New York City have stated they have seen a decrease in the amount of repeat customers coming into their establishment. Now, at certain times of the year, namely summer, this could be offset by an increase in tourism, but the rest of the seasons will be a lot more sluggish, and they're more sluggish in large part due to these minimum wage increases. And again, some people may say, well, that's a trade-off we're willing to make, because yeah, these businesses suffer, but those low-wage workers are getting a bigger paycheck. Again, this falls victim to what I mentioned before. They're only looking at things at face value. They need to ask themselves why those repeat customers are not coming in. They're not coming in even if they're now getting a bigger paycheck if they haven't been laid off. They're not coming in because they took a look at the price increases or the decrease in quality and cleanliness as businesses have had to lay off overnight cleaning staff, cooks, and hosts. So these low-wage workers look at their bigger paycheck, yet they still say to themselves, my finances can't afford these higher price increases, and my favorite restaurant has been slacking lately, so I'm going to go with the ham and cheese sandwiches. As good intentioned as some may be in their advocating for a minimum wage, they are actively making the situation worse for everyone. And the real sad part is that this is actually not that complicated. It's not terribly complex and doesn't require a great deal of energy to figure out why minimum wage laws hurt far more than they help. But that is all for now. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share the video, because that would just make you awesome. Thank you, and have a good one.